Could you all please be upstanding for the national anthem? Well, welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to come out this evening to hear from our great speakers. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Deborah Ewell and I'm recently been appointed to the Committee of Australians for Better Government. So I'm the Australians for Australia representative there. So we need to go through these slides. So thank you all for making the effort to come out and giving up some of your Saturday to hear from our speakers, and I'm sure you'll find them very informative. Because obviously, who believes we need better government? Yeah, we all believe we need better government, so that's what we're doing here. Katie's got 2 hands up. So the Australians for Better Government Committee is composed of Stephen Tripp, who's our President, Tony Bauer, who's our Vice President and Secretary. Recent appointment is Dr. Chris Reynolds. Lee Evans is our International Ambassador from the UK. Angus van der Staff is our Treasurer. Katie McCallum is on the committee, as am I, and we've also got Adam Zara, who's our patron, and you'll be hearing from him a little later as well. So this is the agenda for tonight. We've got Stephen and Katie will be giving us presentations. Scott Challen from the Australian Lobby Group giving us a short presentation. We'll have an intermission, so if you're getting a bit wiggly in your seat. And then we've got Councillor Adam Zara after the break, and then we're hearing from our keynote speaker this evening, Dr. Gary Johns, before our Q&A and close. So you'll notice various trade tables around the room. I've already had somebody ask me, you know, you're all different groups, why are you together? Well, that's part of the point as to why we're here, because it's really important that we all work together to get better government in Australia. There's no point people running off and doing their own thing and saying my way's the only way. Personally, I believe that everybody's doing their bit and we're all undermining the structure from the old structure from different places, and it's not one thing that's going to break that. It's going to be a combination of many things. So the more we can communicate and work together, the quicker and faster we're going to get a good result. So today we've got Scott Challen from the Australian Lobby Group, Katie McCallum from Let's Rethink Renewables, myself from Australians for Australia, Gary Johns, who is amazing at bringing together common sense into politics. I'm going to say he's neither left nor right. He did come from the Labor Party, but he's one of the most down-to-earth, practical men that I've had the privilege of meeting. And of course, we've got ABG. Oh, sorry, I'm just going to go back there for a second. There's also, you'll see the trade tables around the room. So Gary Johns, our keynote speaker, his book about health and unholy conceit is available from Connor Court over here. It's $30. And there's also 3 back issue books there that you can get for $20. And I had a quiet little word before with Anthony, and he said he's happy to do a package deal. Was it $75, Anthony? So you can get 3 back issue books and the current book for that. So that's a really good deal. Just making my way around the room, what's happened to ABG's table? Must be about here somewhere. Oh, it's down the front. So where you came in at the front, you'll see that there's some merchandise on that table. There's T-shirts there for Australians for Better Government for $30. You can get a set of 5 pins. I've got one here about free speech for $15. If somebody hasn't jumped down my throat, I must have got that right. and caps are $35 each. So this is not the only style of cap, but there's an example of a cap for you. And last but not least, we've got the Australian Lobby Group over here. Their T-shirts are also $30 each, and Keith, standing behind the table there, is doing a fine example of modelling that for us. You even get claps, that's amazing. Pins are $10 and the stickers are free. And also, the Lobby Group would love you to join up, sign in via their QR code, which they've got over there. We also have questions at the end of the night, so if you do have questions, there's a question pad where Katie's husband is at the very back of the room there. Go and talk to him and get your questions written down so that we can use those for question time. For anyone wanting to watch this after the live stream, I do believe that the Australian Lobby Group is live streaming this, but you can also get it on YouTube or, on Australians for Better Government or the ABG channel on YouTube or the Commanding the Narrative channel. I think I've got all those bits and pieces, so we will move to the slide. So basically, we're not aligned to any one party. So none of the groups here tonight are aligned with a party. They're all non-partisan, which means that they support good candidates, right? So it's not party-aligned politics. We're all about education. So all of those groups are about education, public events, policy advocacy, which ABG works to promote greater accountability, transparency and genuine representation of government for the benefit of all Australians. I don't know if you've noticed lately, but it seems that government just does what it wants to do and it really doesn't consider what's in the best interest of the people, and that's why we're all here tonight. That's what the next thing basically says, so I don't need to read that one. So we are helping to begin the discussion on how we can reform and optimise our system and make change for the better. So I've already stated we're not a political party, right? Nobody here tonight is a political party. We might all belong to different political parties, but we're here to work together. So our mission, we have 6 pillars to our mission. We want to reform the Constitution. We want to make sure there's a true separation of powers, which is not the case at the moment. Educate Australians in civics. There is no teaching in schools to educate people about our political system or our voting system, and people need that desperately. We want to empower voters. One of the examples of that is having the ability to have a citizens to be able to veto or start legislation. We want to make sure our freedoms are enshrined, and we also want to raise up pride in Australia, and part of that is the national anthem, being delighted and thrilled to be Australian people, men and women. So, how your support helps us tonight. So, by coming along tonight, you've helped us financially. We really appreciate that. So, it helps with social media campaigns, helping us to host events and conferences like this, printing flyers and materials so we can get that word out. We've got people here tonight that have come all the way from Sydney to be here especially for this event, and billboards and advertising so that we can get this message out that it is possible to get better government to middle mainstream Australia. So, on with the program. Our first speaker this evening is Stephen Tripp, who is the president of ABG. I first met Stephen when I popped down to Sydney for a climate ridiculousness conference, because I really hate the word climate change. I just can't bring myself to say that. So Stephen's always had a keen interest in politics and current affairs. He was the 2022 federal election candidate for the high-profile seat of Warringah. He's remained politically active. He served on the New South Wales State Executive for One Nation and later as Secretary of the Condamine branch of the Liberal Party. He's currently independent of any party, and I've lost the rest of his introduction, but he's a great guy. He works incredibly hard for ABG. I think he does 20 to 100 times more than I do, and ABG wouldn't be doing this event without Stephen. In fact, it wouldn't be doing anything without Stephen, and I have to give Katie a special mention in there as well. It also wouldn't be doing anything without Katie. So without further ado, please welcome to the stage Stephen Tripp.
G'day everyone, welcome and thank you for coming to the event today. It's great to have you here on a Saturday night. I'm sure you could be out partying or something like that instead of talking about politics, but unfortunately this is the situation that we're in this country. A lot of people feel like we are on the wrong track and we could be doing a lot better to optimise the performance not only of our government but of our country as well. And Australians for Better Government was started in late 2024, early 2025, so we're still in our infancy in a lot of ways. But what we've found so far is that a big part of what we do is not just putting out proposals and solutions on how to fix our government and our governmental system, but it's also educating the public on civics. So what we find is that when we hold events like this and we start talking about our proposals, there's a lot of blank stares sometimes. People are just trying to catch up on how our system actually operates. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that it's not taught in schools. We don't teach civics in our schools anymore, and that's something that Australians for Better Government wants to address. We do hopefully one day want to roll out a civics education course for everyone, not just children but everyone. But that's why we hold events like this, to start talking about our system of government, and through that discussion hopefully educate people and get them to start thinking about our system of government and whether it's optimal and whether it's performing at an optimal level. Now, we don't focus on the political parties and maybe the personalities. We may mention them from time to time because that's really what cuts through with people. But we don't focus on the symptoms, which we feel are the policies and the personalities. We focus on the structure of our government because we think that's the root cause of some of the things that are really going wrong in this country. So one of the things that we really focus on is the Constitution. And if you read the Constitution, you would see that the Governor-General is mentioned quite a few times in that Constitution, and if you were maybe from another country or maybe reading the Constitution for the first time, you'd be forgiven for believing that the Governor-General has a significant role in this country. Unfortunately, that's not the case. We have a Governor-General that is selected by the government of the day and the Prime Minister, and is basically told what to do and what to say. And that's the situation. Now, that's through convention. And what do we mean by convention? Well, the convention is the Westminster system, which is basically a whole bunch of unwritten rules and laws that have been operational for quite some time, goes all the way back to the UK, but it's not actually specifically stated anywhere, including in our Constitution. So an example of that, and now is, firstly, anyone here read the Australian Constitution? A couple of people? Oh, that's good. I'm glad to see Gary Johnson's got his hand up, that's good. Can anyone tell me how many times is the office of Prime Minister mentioned in the Australian Constitution? 0. That's right, 0. Is anyone shocked by that? Yes? You would think that the highest office in the country would actually be mentioned in the Constitution, maybe even defined in the Constitution, the role of the Prime Minister, how the Prime Minister is held accountable. Things like that should be set in stone. I think that goes a long way to explaining why people are so confused with our system of government, because they're questioning, how does it actually operate? We have all these unwritten rules that don't really make sense to anyone because they're not really explained. We just say, oh, well, it's convention. But it should be in black and white. That's at least the view of Australians for Better Government. If we want a serious country, we should have a serious constitution. So if the Prime Minister is not mentioned in the Australian Constitution, how do we get to a situation where the Prime Minister basically runs his party in the lower house, he tells his party what to do in the Senate, so he controls both houses of Parliament, he selects the Governor-General, so now he also runs the executive branch of government, and a lot of times he's selecting judges and basically running having an influence in all 3 branches of government. Now, is that optimal? We need to put that question to the Australian people. And what Australians for Better Government is proposing is we're proposing that the Governor-General is not selected by the Prime Minister and the Governor of the day. Instead, the Governor-General is elected by the Australian people to give the Australian people a say. But that also does something else. What it does, it separates the executive branch of government and the legislative branch of government. Can anyone explain the difference between those two? A lot of blank stares, okay? And that's a big problem, right? Because when I talked about there's no civics education in this country, we should all know what that means. So basically, we're told in Australia we have a separation of powers, and the reason why we have a separation of powers is so we don't have dictators, and we don't have an authoritarian regime or anything like that. We definitely don't want that. We've seen that in other countries, and we've seen that throughout history. And we have a very unique system where we don't have that in this country, and we've basically had a good government up until this point. For the most part, we could be a hell of a lot better. But we are meant to have three branches of the government that are meant to be separate and independent from each other. So you're meant to have the legislative branch, which is the Parliament. That's the lower house and the Senate. And that has the power to make laws and change laws. Then you have the executive branch of government, which, if you read the Constitution in Chapter 2, it says that the Governor-General has the power to exercise the role of the executive branch on behalf of the Crown. And the executive branch basically puts those laws into action through its government department. So you have ministers and then the government department. So the Department for Health, Education, Defence, whatever it might be. So they actually put the law into action. And those two branches are meant to be separate. And then the third branch is the judiciary, which is the courts, and that rules on the legislation that has gone through. So does that make sense so far? Is everyone keeping up with that? So what ABG is trying to say is that we want a conflict between the branches, not in a hostile way, but to keep each other accountable and to make sure that the best policies are going through for the Australian people. So we want a Prime Minister running the legislative branch of government, and then we want a Governor-General running the executive branch of government. We also want to limit the power of political parties, because if you read the Constitution, you also find that there's no real mention of political parties apart from one section which was an amendment based on casual vacancies for the Senate. So there's nothing that specifies that we need political parties. Now I think if you walked up to the general person on the street, most people would say, okay, it's probably sensible to have political parties in the lower house because you need a party to form government. But in the Senate, why do we need political parties? The Senate and the upper house, and this includes upper houses of state parliaments, and this was an idea that Councillor Adam Zara actually put forward, and he's going to elaborate on, hopefully, in his speech a bit later on. If the Senate is meant to be the house of review, then why are they reviewing legislation based on their party allegiances? So you get minor parties in there, and oftentimes in the upper houses you do get a lot of minor parties represented. A good example recently was Senator Ralph Babet. He put forward a bill basically saying that he wanted to push for a referendum for free speech to be enshrined in the Constitution. Now you would think that most sensible people would say, okay, well if the Australian people, a sensible person would say, let's put that vote to the Australian people and let the Australian people decide whether they want free speech in the Constitution. And if they say yes, we put it in. If they say no, they don't put it in. Well, that was voted down purely because Ralph Babet was part of the UAP, the United Australia Party. He wasn't part of Labor, he wasn't part of the Liberals, he wasn't part of the club. So they knocked his legislation, and another minor parties as well. They might put forward really great legislation, but oftentimes it gets knocked down because it doesn't fit in with the major parties. So it really begs the question, why are there political parties in the upper houses around the country? So Australians for Better Government says, we want to abolish political parties and political affiliation in the Senate and in the upper houses. So all senators are independent, so it can truly be a house of review. We would also extend that to the Governor-General. So the Governor-General would also not be part of a political party. So you'd only have political parties in the lower house. So hopefully, when legislation is put forward, it's judged on the merits of that legislation and not to political ideology or alliances or whatever it might be. So these are examples of how we optimise our system of government. Another example is Section 64, which is in Chapter 2 of the Constitution, the executive branch. Does anyone tell me what the executive branch does? Is anyone keeping up with what I'm talking about? Still a lot of blank stares. But you can watch this back later. Hopefully you can keep up with me, right? Again, the executive branch of government is your ministers, your departments, and they put the laws into action. Now, there's one line in our Constitution that completely ruins, in my opinion, our system of government, and that's Section 64, the ministers to sit in Parliament line. And what that line of the Constitution states is that all ministers are to be selected from, I would say, the suboptimal lot that sits in the Parliament. the Senate and the House of Representatives. Why do I say suboptimal? Because currently you have a situation where people like Richard Marles is our Defence Minister. If you read his bio, it reads as though he should be the Minister for Unions, not the Minister for Defence, because he spent his whole life in the union movement. And we had the Honourable John Ruddock speak at one of our events. He's a member of the New South Wales Upper House. And he said, Richard Marles probably doesn't even know how to fire a gun, let alone be the Minister for Defence. So why do we have this man heading up one of the most important departments of our country, our Defence Force? And you can look at other departments as well. We have Chris Bowen as Climate Change and Energy Minister. In all fairness, do you think Chris Bowen has the experience in the energy sector to be able to run that department effectively? Is there any support for Chris Bowen here? Look, I'm not picking on Labor, they're in government, right? So it extends to all sides of government, Liberal or Labor. I mean, we had a situation when the Liberals were last in Parliament where we had the Prime Minister assign himself to 5 ministries and he was contemplating assigning himself to a 6th. So is he, I mean, that's a true representation of authoritarianism, really. You want to assign yourself to every single ministry. Why is there nothing in our Constitution that prevents that? So what we would say is we would want to go to a referendum, again, ask the Australian people if they're on side with us, and we would ask them to take a big red pen and put a line through that section of the Constitution, which would then allow the Governor-General, who hopefully now is elected, to go out into the broader Australian community and select heads of the department based on their industry experience, not whether they're the right faction in a political party, which is often the case. So now you could go to the Defence Force and look at someone like maybe General Peter Cosgrove. Now I use that example, not in light of, you know, he's probably too old now, okay, right, he probably wouldn't want to be a minister, but he does have the credentials that you would want as a Minister for Defence. And I'm sure there's plenty of other options out there that would be great Defence Ministers who have experience in the Defence Force to be able to run that department effectively. And that's what we're all about. We want to optimise our performance of government to get government to work better. And these are not ideas that are completely off the page. These are systems that operate in other parts of the world. America is a good example. So the President can nominate heads of departments from the whole US population. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is the head of their health department. Well, he's not in Parliament, he's not in the Congress, but he was able to be selected because the President felt he was the best person for that role. So the same system would work here. The Governor-General would select these ministers or nominate these ministers to get approved by the Senate. Now, I know I've only got 2 minutes left. There's a lot of proposals that we've got. There's a lot I could talk about. It's all up on our website, australiansforbetter.com. But one thing I want to finish on is accountability. We need to build accountability into our system of government because currently there's no accountability for parliamentarians. We have politicians that go out there and promise the world, or they say they're not going to do something, and we have recent examples of that where they promise they're not going to do something, and when they're elected, they do it. And there's no recourse for the Australian public to be able to push back and say, no, we didn't vote for that and we don't agree with that. So examples of what we could do is we could introduce citizens' initiated veto, where you could get a movement, a grassroots movement of people to say, we're going to put forward a petition, and if enough people can sign that, it goes to a broader vote, a plebiscite, to be able to repeal legislation. A good example is the Snowy Hydro 2, and I wish I had enough time to talk about this. I'm going to try and squeeze it in. We've had the Snowy Hydro 2, $2 billion, it was announced at, now it's at $42 billion and it's way over time. And most people say, why can't they just cancel it? Why can't they get rid of it? And no party seems willing to do it. Why? If you look at the whole net zero rollout, because wind and solar is intermittent, you need to overbuild the system, which means at peak times you have an excess amount of energy and at low times you have no energy. So you need battery systems. And the battery technology is not there. So they rely on this pumped hydro system to keep the whole net zero system rolling. So if you look at the numbers, about 50% of that battery storage would have to come from the Snowy Hydro 2. So if you were to cancel the Snowy Hydro 2, the whole net system, the whole net zero system falls over, and you would have to completely scrap it. So it's never going to get scrapped if you leave it up to the politicians. So that's one thing. One thing I do want to finish on, because this is important. We do need to build accountability into our system, and that's recall elections, which do operate in other countries around the world and also states of America. Let's look at other countries and see what works for them and see if we can adopt that to our system. Now, I'm not saying every system is perfect. That's why we called it Australians for Better Government and not Australians for Perfect Government, because you're dealing with human nature and we're never going to get the perfect system. But we need to continually strive to get a better system, and that's what Australians for Better Government is all about. We want to start that conversation, so hopefully a lot of your heads are starting to think about this stuff where you haven't thought about it before. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Stephen. That was very, very educational. Did anybody learn anything? Yeah, quite a few of you in the room. That's awesome, including Katie. That's pretty impressive. Probably already knows most of it. So our next speaker is the very lovely Katie McCallum. She's a committee member, she's a wife, a mum. She runs the Kilkeven General Store and Cafe. She lives at the top of the scenic Black Snake Range, which is just west of Gympie, and most of you here will know where that is. She's had a 16-year career as a general duties police officer. She served the northern regions of Queensland, and I'm not going to say these right, so please forgive me, but Boola, Domagij, Mount Isa, Mornington Island, told you I would get it wrong, Camavale, before moving to Toowoomba and later to Mergen. Her career has allowed her to be exceptional in problem solving and helping to ensure community safety. So Katie, as you will all know, heads up Let's Rethink Renewables. She does an amazing job at that. I think that everywhere she's spoken, she's just incredible. I actually feel Katie's a wonderful MC, so you've got me instead of Katie tonight. She's an absolutely amazing lady and a real credit to this area. So please help me welcome somebody I'm sure you all know, Katie McCallum.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you so much. I always feel a bit funny when people say nice things about me. I spent so many years being called horrible names as a police officer. I put my hand up to go straight to Mount Isa from the academy, and I had never heard the things I got called when I first arrived there. I didn't know what I had done to myself, but anyway, thank you very much. Yes, my name is Katie McCallum, and I do live out at Kilkeven, which most people here would know where that is. I am the president of a group called Let's Rethink Renewables, and I wanted to give you a story tonight about how that came about so that you understand what it is and what we stand for, and why I'd like you to leave here tonight and take the message that Let's Rethink Renewables is attempting to get out into the rest of Australia. I want you to take it forth, and I want you to spread it for us, because that is the only way we can win this fight that we're in. So a few years back, the Queensland government-owned corporation Powerlink arrived on our doorstep in Kilkeven. There's a lot of faces I already know here that know about this. We were just living our lives like all of the people in these communities all around Australia are doing. And then one day you wake up to this terribly blunt and brutal letter from a private company or a government-owned corporation telling you that they are coming to take some of your land, whether that will be that they'll compulsorily acquire it or they'll try to buy it off you. And that, this doesn't say it in the letters, of course, but this is what it does, and they're about to divide your community in two. Because there will be half of the community who either want to take the money and run, or think it's a good idea because they've been brainwashed into believing that the planet's about to cook. And then you've got the other half, like me, who saw the letter and said, well, over my dead body, are they going to come in here and destroy this community? And you know how I feel about that, Corinne. You've seen me when I've talked about it. It's not just Kilkeven that is at risk here. It's the entire of the nation. But for us specifically, because most of the faces here I know come from this region, there's a few faces that have come in from outside of Gympie tonight. everybody needs to understand that when these companies come in, when these organisations come in and divide these communities, they're doing it to weaken us. They want to put these projects in, and ultimately it will destroy the Wide Bay and Burnett here for us. If Barumba goes in, the HV lines will go in all the way through Kilkeven, running through a greenfield area that's never had any industrialisation in it. And you'll see that solar farm out at Waluga. It's about to be, has everybody seen the increase in size there at the moment? All the trees laying in the paddock, belly up, that they bulldozed last week? That's going to be all solar panels, from Widgie right through to Lower Wonga. And once it starts, it doesn't stop. In February, I went down to Dubbo and I did a tour of the Central West Arana Renewable Energy Zone. What's down there is what we've got times 100. They have industrialised the entire area around Dubbo and Wellington, so much so that there's boards on the shop fronts in the main streets of the towns because people have left. So that's the message that we're trying to get out to everybody. And I built Let's Rethink Renewables with my good mate, Jim Wilmot. We started off with our fight against Powerlink, and it just grew and grew and grew. And then I ended up with the National Rational Energy Network, and we held that big Reckless Renewables rally on the steps of Parliament House in Canberra. So we then realised that there was a message that needed to get out, and we put our heads together, and what we came up with is what we believe are the 5 pillars that this nation survives on. Without these 5 pillars, there would not be a nation I love, and I hope you all love. And that is our productive farmlands, our rural landscapes, our wildlife habitats, and the 2 most important, our strong communities and our way of life. Because these projects are white-handing this country, and those 5 things are being slowly crippled by renewable energy projects. Once those things are gone, they are gone for good. They are unrenewable. We can't get them back. So we must protect them at all costs. This is the most amazing nation in the world. If they cripple our energy grid and they destroy our productive farmlands and they divide our communities, which we're seeing, we've got families in communities all around this region who don't talk to their neighbours anymore. We're seeing it out west where the turbines have gone in. Families who used to have cups of tea together on their verandas of their homesteads on the weekends, they don't speak to each other anymore because somebody over here signed up and took a whole heap of money for some turbines and left this person here to clean up the mess, and they've got nowhere to go. So that's why we're saying that we really, these 5 pillars, we really need to get our message out. We need to talk to people like you who are here today, and we need you to spread that message for us, because what we discovered in our fight over the last 5-6 years against this renewable energy BS is that the people in the city, and I don't fault them on this, because if you were born, bred, raised, have never left the city and have never been out of the city, and there's plenty of people like that, you don't understand what our lives are like and how we live. Those people in the city, they don't know about this stuff. And when you try to explain it to them, they glaze over a little bit. So they needed to have a jazzy, palatable, easy to digest campaign that we could put before them so that they understood those 5 things which keep them alive. The farms, the wildlife habitat, the communities, our landscapes. If they're gone, the city doesn't exist either. So we need to bridge the gap between the country and the city, and we're hoping to do it with the message that we have for the people in the city. And that's why we need to get the Let's Rethink Renewables messaging into these places so they can understand what is at risk. But the other thing that we're trying to get everybody to understand is that since probably the late 1970s, this nation has been signed up to multiple United Nations conventions. I'm sure you all know that. I know there's a lot of faces here who understand all that already. Right back when they created the United Nations framework for climate change and had a convention on it. That was in the 70s. Then we went to the Kyoto Protocol, then we went to the Paris Agreement, and everybody knows where that got us to. But what happened by our politicians in the last 30, 40 years signing us up to all these protocols is they have embedded the United Nations woke ideologies about how they want you to live. They've embedded that into every level of how we live. The local council, the state government, the federal government, every company. I talk to people who work in positions in really big companies that we all know about, and they aren't allowed to get certain things approved until they've got the environmental tick, or they've ticked off the list of things that abide by the United Nations rules that they've set upon us. So we need to get out of the net zero emissions targets and requirements that the government's currently placed on us. So we need to get out of the Paris Agreement. And I've had this argument, we can't get out of the Paris Agreement. We signed up to it. Well, bloody well, Donald Trump did it. He's done it twice now. Joe Biden got them back in again, and Donald got in and got them straight out of it. We're our own people. We're our own nation. We're a bloody brilliant nation too, can I just say. I thank God every day that this is where he chose for me to be born. We are the luckiest nation in the world. Why are we handing over our energy security to the United Nations and abiding by their rules? They don't live here. Who lives here? We live here. So what we're going to see, if this continues down the path that it is every single thing in your life, it already is, but it's going to get worse, is being priced, it's being amended, your accessibility to products, it's all being affected by the United Nations, ultimately. You follow the money all the way to the top, you'll find that everything in your life, from your cup of coffee in the morning to the products you buy at the grocery store, your car, your fuel, what your kids are being taught at school, the climate agenda and everything that the United Nations is shoving down our throats is affecting your dollar in your hip pocket. So I've got a mate, he's still in the coppers. So here in Queensland, if you work for certain groups like the police or government departments, ambulance, you can access salary sacrificing on your vehicle through a company called RemServe. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about that. So he went to get a new car, and when we talk about manipulating markets because of the United Nations, this is what I'm talking about. So he goes to RemServe, he gets a quote, and the quote for just the old stock standard little Toyota Corolla that runs on unleaded fuel was so out of touch because the subsidies on the new EV were so great, and they gave him a cash-back deal at the start and at the end of his contract that he bought his wife a new EV. So it goes further than that, because who's seen the EVs on the road in Gympie lately? There is that many. I nearly got hit by a Tesla here today. He was angry that I was in a diesel-powered Ford Ranger, I guess, but anyway. At least I'm not chewing up the road like he is with his 600 kilos of battery. The EVs. I was talking to a car dealership owner the other day, and this is where you're finding that our cost of living is increasing. So the particular 4 companies that his dealership has, they have all told their dealerships that they must install EV charge points in their workshops for their brand. You can't just have one generic one, their brand. You've also got to have hoists and lifts, because these cars have to be lifted off the ground in a different way than a normal car because the batteries are welded into the chassis. So he wants to follow the rules so that he can keep the dealership running. He's got dealerships all over Australia. He employs several hundred people. But he can't put the EV charge points into his dealership because there's not enough amperage in the network for him to power them. And when he turns one charger on, every hoist in his workshop goes out. And it's a big dealership. So he's arguing with bureaucrats right now on how we're going to fix that. My point being to you, is that we all sit at home every day and we think that we've handed the job in the bureaucracy and the government to people who are competent and who care about us. And I was just reading a couple of new notes I saw on the climate change website before, where they say that the introduction of emissions targets and net zero by 2050, what it's going to do is it's going to make Australians' lives better. So it's going to make your life better, in case you didn't know. Yeah, way better. And it's going to decrease the cost of conducting business in Australia. I own a business. My costs are going through the roof. It's out of control, in fact. So the bloke that's in charge of that department, we heard Stephen talk about before. I call him the jockey. That's my key word for him now when I speak about him. His name's Chris Bowen. And I've said this 1,000 times to people. He's in charge of that department, and that department is facilitating the rollout of all of these rules that cause people like our car dealership owner over here to have to spend all this extra money, and he still can't make the requirements work that he's been told he has to do. And he's doing that because ultimately Chris Bowen over here, the jockey who can't ride the horse that he's been given to ride, can't even get in the saddle, that bloke is making decisions because these guys up here, the United Nations, are pulling on the puppet strings that are attached to his back. And we're the fodder. We are just the fodder. We are the people at the end of the food chain who have to pick up the cost of all this. And when you can't pick the cost of it up, guess what happens? You just don't get a new car because the new vehicle emissions targets are so big that tradies can't afford to buy a new Ford Ranger anymore. So we're the people who are going to pay the price of all this. Every single supplier that I deal with in my tiny little shop has carbon certification details written on the bottoms of the paperwork that we've got. My brother owns a really big civil construction company. He is so worried about how he's going to maintain all of the requirements being placed on him moving into the future because of all of the federal EPBC laws that are being placed on the industry that he's in. So what happens when all of these shops in Kilkeven, if I shut my doors and walk away because these rules that have been forced on me by the local council, the state government and the federal government because of the United Nations, what happens when I shut my doors and walk away? There's 5 ladies with jobs in Kilkeven because I have a tiny shop and we make really good hamburgers and good coffee. We actually do, seriously. So people come from everywhere for it. So that's the white-hanting of our community. I guess what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to draw a big picture here so that you can see the whole holistic view of this. What I believe that the fundamental department that we've got down there in Canberra, that the jockey's in charge of, that department controls everything in your life, absolutely everything. And if the costs continue to increase and the impediment of the government on small business, medium business, big business increases, we're going to see businesses close. And when they close, communities like Kilkeven, Gympie, Imbil, where we were today, those are the communities who are currently being white-anted. And we all know what white ants do. They climb up through your house frame and then one day you wonder why the roof's starting to curve in and then you find out that your house is destroyed. We need to protect our house. The house is called Australia. Australia is under threat because of United Nations protocols telling us that we must get our electricity from solar panels, wind turbines and pumped hydro projects. Has anybody been to Imbil and seen what they've really proposed out there? It's disgusting. So please pass the message of let's rethink renewables out to the rest of the community when you're involved in conversations. Let them know that our productive farmlands, our rural landscapes, our strong communities, our wildlife habitats and our Australian way of life is unrenewable. We have to protect it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. That was very informative, and I'm sure Katie could talk for 10 times as long. She's just got so much knowledge about this. Our next speaker is Scott Challen, who's with the Australian Lobby Group. Scott really started to rise to prominence when he was leading the marches in Brisbane, Australia marches against mass immigration. Scott's also a tradie, so he's very down to earth. He's really a great person to be leading the Australian Lobby Group. The Australian Lobby Group has also, and he'll probably talk about this, has also put a employee down in Canberra to, basically he's got 2 mandates. One is to stop mass immigration and the other is to get rid of foreign lobbyists out of Parliament. I didn't even know we had foreign lobbyists. So I learnt today apparently there's 3,500 lobbyists in total. That's an awful lot of people with access to our politicians and we don't have that access. So please help me to welcome Scott, who's doing a wonderful job for our country.
Well, thanks very much, guys. I've got to say, looking at the speaker lineup tonight, I feel very underqualified to be here. But and following up from Katie as well, who's such an excellent orator. Her story about renewables really resonated with me recently. I just got back from Europe a couple of weeks ago and drove 2,500 kilometres through Europe on a big trip with my wife, and almost every single kilometre of road I drive through in Europe is surrounded by wind farms, almost every single one of them. There are wind farms as far as the eye can see, and as Katie so eloquently put it last weekend in Bundaberg, it's like being in the War of the Worlds. You're surrounded by these huge, giant pieces of machinery that are generating electricity, and when I was driving through France, for a country that has 53 nuclear power plants. So none of it makes sense, really. So what we're seeing in Australia here is a renewable rollout that's going to cover our countryside. Now, we're not seeing them everywhere every day at the moment, but trust me, the people of Europe didn't expect to be looking at them all over the place either, and then suddenly they were there. Now, I didn't get up here to talk about Katie's topic, but it was just an observation point. Listen, Stephen Tripp, who I hadn't heard speak before, fantastic points about citizens-initiated referendum, taking power back, really looking and reframing what the Constitution is. And I guess what we've done with the Australian Lobby Group is look at this from the perspective of, if you were an organisation that wanted to cover Australia in Chinese-made renewable technology, that has to be pushed by someone into Parliament and into politics, especially to get politicians to resonate with that. Because as Australians, we think that we vote and we're part of the democratic process, but voting is the least amount you can do when it comes to being involved in how your country is being run. It's literally the smallest thing you can do. It's important, but the reality is this is much more important than just voting. And the reason those politicians have gotten away with listening to those lobbyists tell them that green energy is the best option for Australia and covering our beautiful countryside with these monstrosities is the future, is because lobbyists were in their ear. And that foreign interest goes much further than that. It goes to the agreements that we signed with things like the UN, with treaties that we've done, with free trade agreements. Now, I was in Bundaberg last weekend at a rally with a few of you here, and I was talking to some Bundy sugar farmers who were telling me they're going to get the worst price per tonne for sugar this year that they've had in years. Now, we just did a free trade deal with Europe. Some of you guys might be familiar with that. You might have heard about it. And we're increasing our sugar quota to Europe. That sounded like a good thing until I found out it went from 1/3 of one ship to one full ship. One full ship of sugar. That's it. That's what the sugar farmers got out of the free trade deal. How did that happen? Because for some reason we seem to get the shit end of all the deals, the bad end. And is it because guys like Chris Bowen and the bureaucracy in there are just really bad at deals, or is it because there's something bigger at play here? We could all get a little conspiratorial with that, because I feel that most of us think the same way, that something's not quite right. They're meant to be accountable to us. We don't want these things to be happening. We want better deals, but we don't seem to be getting them. And that's because the vested interests that those politicians and those bureaucracies have is bigger than you. You're an inconvenience to them. Voting is a pain in the butt for politicians. In fact, they'd get rid of it if they could, I'm sure of it. I was a member of the Liberal Party for a couple of years, got the opportunity to look inside that, thinking post-COVID that I could play a part in helping rectify what they'd done so badly, and then found out that, my God, we're led by numpties, and the party is run by numpties. And we don't even have the power to change the leadership within the party. The party is a delegate-led party. It's not even a member-led party. And unless you've got the delegates, you ain't changing shit, excuse my language. So politicians aren't beholden to the members of their parties. They're not really that beholden to their constituents. And they love doing shitty deals that aren't in the interest of Australians. So at the Australian Lobby Group, we took a different approach. We looked at it and went, what are the corporations doing? What are the interests doing that are working against us? Well, they hire lobbyists. Well, why don't we start a lobbying entity? Because the last thing Australia needed was another minor right-wing political party, trust me. We don't need any more minor parties. We need to get our voices in front of the people making decisions. So we went to Canberra and registered a formal lobbying entity. And I was surprised to find out there's 3,500 registered federal lobbyists in Australia. That's not counting the amount of state lobbyists that we have. That's completely separate. If you're going to be a lobbyist, you must be registered with the Attorney General's office, and you must also register your clients with the Attorney General's office. So this is a PTY Ltd company that we've created. It's a company entity, and it's a business agreement. It's a contract that we have with our clients. And who's our clients? You're our clients. You are the clients of the Australian Lobby Group. How do we do that? If we've got to register every client, we created a second entity that is the members of the Australian Lobby Group. And that is the single client that the lobby group has. That's it. That's the member base. And we only have to register one name. That's the members. So what we've done is we've essentially used their system, created our lobby group, got tens of thousands of people to sign up to the lobby group. It's been fantastic. It's been an absolute ball terror. And we are representing them. And what are their interests? Well, we went, what are the best 14 policies from all the parties that we like that we can tweak a little to create our members' interests, our clients' needs that we're going to represent to those politicians. Now, they're on our Australian Lobby Group website. Those 14 positions are the backbone, or our spine. We've got 2 key points, and I believe that Deborah touched on them before: ending mass immigration and banning foreign lobbying. And under that banning foreign lobbying, we're also talking about withdrawing ourselves from these shitty trade deals and these UN agreements and global agreements that we've signed up to. That is going to happen. Now, I didn't get in this to lose, we got in this to win. I like to think that collectively, as Australians, we know the voting process isn't working for us. We know that we're not getting the proper representative democracy that we should have in Canberra. And there's great people doing good work to change that. But with the current system that we currently have, this was a way to kick in the door and get in the faces of people. That was how we did it. Now, what are politicians scared of? It's the best paid job they've ever had. Let's be honest about it. Chris Bowen, at best, to be an $80,000 a year car salesman. That's it. At best. At best. We know that. You know, Stephen Miles, what's the Defence Minister? I believe he's Deputy PM as well, right? Correct? Richard Miles, sorry. Yep. And I'm told by a friend who is a crew attendant in the Air Force that he loves to be called Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, I might add. So these are the people that we're talking about here. They're not that good. But what they are scared of is pressure. And pressure comes in a lot of different ways. Being organised, getting together and working collectively in their electorates to let them know that they're under threat. And there's a whole bunch of Labor people there that won at the last election when Labor won that massive majority that are first-termers. Some of them got in there by very small margins. They should be under threat. But what are we going to replace it with? What, Team Blue? Are we going to do that again? Have more of that? Because those Team Blue guys have had the same lobbyists in their ears as well. Let's be clear about this. It was Scott Morrison that signed us up to net zero. Didn't talk to the cabinet. You know, Barnaby Joyce supported it. I'm glad that he's on Team Orange, but let's be honest about what's happened here, how we got to this situation. So pressure equals outcome. You are pressure. So what we've done with the Australian Lobby Group is formed that from the rallies that we ran in Queensland last year against mass immigration. And some of you guys were at those rallies. We ran 3 of them in Brisbane. Tens of thousands of people turned up to every rally. And we took all those people that came to the rallies and we got them to sign up to the lobby group, and we turned that into a database of people that are now members, clients of the main lobby group, that we can hopefully, when the next election comes around, deploy into those electorates to make a difference. How to vote cards, handing out pamphlets, having conversations like this. More members, more pressure. This is what unions do. This is what all organisations do that want to wield influence. It's about numbers. So the Australian Lobby Group was born out of protesting and rallies. Now, people say protesting and rallies doesn't amount to anything. Well, it did. It amounted to this. And this organisation that's had multiple meetings in Canberra with federal politicians, some good, some bad, but we got commitments from people like Pauline Hanson to repeal 18C and to review things like the 2025 anti-Semitism and hate speech laws. Things that impinge on your free speech and will potentially put you in the crosshairs of being a target by a government that wants to wreck you and shut you up. And it's accelerating now. It's getting harder and faster. There's a reason for that, because they know they're losing control. If an election was called today, I'd be reasonably confident that Albo might lose or just hang on. And there'd be a whole bunch of orange people in there, and a whole bunch of people that we would hopefully trust to help push and change the way things currently are. And that's why you guys are here tonight. So I'm encouraging you to join the lobby group. Scan the QR code. Just put your details in there. Let us stay in touch with you and keep you activated. We put a full-time lobbyist down in Canberra. His name's Lachlan Lade. Some of you guys might have heard of him. He's from Proserpine. Good country fella. He's run for the Libertarians before. Very experienced young guy. Intelligent, smart. We would love to see him become a political candidate at the next election and get him elected. That's wielding power. Where can we find great candidates and get them elected? Now, what we're dealing with here is a lobbying process that has spent the last 50 years, 30 years, 40 years in Australia building its influence networks into federal politics. What I mean by that is that they've supported, helped, financed young people in those parties, nurtured them through into political offsider roles, working in these offices, then ultimately getting them pre-selected as candidates in their seats and then getting them elected. And then those interests have the ear of that politician, correct? That's what happens. Now, you're in a really unusual situation here because there's a political shift happening in Australia that is rare as hen's teeth. What you're watching right now with the orange wave and the shift in politics here, as some of you know, if you've been watching this for a long time, you realise this is once-in-a-lifetime stuff we're seeing happening. It's rare. Last time I'd seen something like this was 1998 when Hanson won a bunch of seats in Queensland. Some of you people will remember that. This doesn't come around that often. So we've got an opportunity in this window to get that influence. And we've had great meetings with the One Nation people. We've had great meetings with some of the Nationals as well. Some of the people that we'd like to see in federal parliament come this next election, which means that as a lobbyist, I know you. We've spoken with you. You've spoken on our stages at the rallies. We have a relationship with you. Are they going to listen to us? Well, we certainly hope so, and that's the reason why we're doing what we're doing. We believe that this is a gap that hasn't been exploited properly in the Australian political process. We identified that and we went for it. And we went for it because we had tens of thousands of people turn up at our rallies and we knew there was an interest and a demand to get something done. Now, I commend anyone who's actively involved in trying to change the system. It needs to be changed, it needs to be fixed, but first of all, we've got to get the right people in there and get rid of the people that are roadblocking that. Because as Stephen Tripp correctly identified, the House of Review has become a house of FU. That's what it's become. That's what it's become. That's what you're dealing with. Roadblocks everywhere. It can be beaten. We can break it. This is a rare moment. You need to get people around you to understand that, make sure they vote accordingly, learn how to vote, teach people how to vote, and make sure that we can keep the pressure on the people that we've got to get rid of. And that's me for tonight. Thank you very much, guys. Don't forget to sign up on the QR code. It'd be great to have you involved.
Thank you, Scott. That was terrific. So you can see we've heard from 3 great speakers so far tonight, all with very similar ideas about moving this country forward. We're going to take a 10-minute intermission. During that 10-minute intermission, there's a few things I'd like to suggest to you. One is if you've got questions, please go and sign up and write your question down because we'll be taking the questions on pieces of paper at the end. After the intermission, we're going to hear from Gary Johns. You might want to think about popping across to Connor Court and grabbing your copy of his excellent book, Public Health and Unhealthy Conceit, during that intermission time. So the lovely Anthony will be very happy to help you with that. And also you can get T-shirts. You can get 2 T-shirts, one from each stand. You can get one from Australian Lobby Group, one from Australians for Better Government. They're $30 each. Hats, pins, free stickers. So please make your way around and do that. And also please make sure if you want to use the facilities, this is an excellent time to do that. There's a couple through this door here and there's some at the back of the room there. So we'll see you back here in 10 minutes. Thank you. Do you want to turn the microphones off?
Oh, well,
No. Okay.
you're very good at this, Deborah.
I enjoy it.
Takes a huge weight off.
Small interruption. If anybody would like some cold water, the club has got some lovely refreshing water and some cups up by the bar. So if anybody's in need of some good water, please go and avail yourself of that. Thank you.
I thought it was dying when I had it. I felt like the battery was going flat.
Well, that was loud enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got more hats coming. And if you're September 13, we're our international election rally in Brisbane. And it's a lovely one. We'll be selling guns at that one spot. But
Could everyone take their seats, please? If everyone could take their seats again, we need to get the show back on the road. I can do that. When's it start?
13th of September in Brisbane, and it's working its way around, ending up in Canberra on the 14th of November. Remembrance Day week.
Sorry, 14th of November. 13th of
Leaving
September.
Brisbane and it's heading up in any small towns along the way, so it's 8 weeks.
Has it got a name? If everyone could take their seats, that would be great, please. What's the name of the rally?
The first rally is in Brisbane on September
Yeah, got
13th.
that. What's it
Yep,
called?
and it's called the Australia Marches. Australia Marches. Rally follows socials, Australia Marches.
Oh, all of a sudden it got quiet. Okay, well, thank you to everybody for making that a reasonably quick break. Everybody's got so much good information to share, and so our time is getting a little bit away from us, but let's see if we can keep this reasonably on track. What Scotty forgot to mention when he was here is about the Australia Marches rallies, starting in Brisbane on the 13th of September. So if you can get down to Brisbane for that weekend, that would be amazing, and ending up in Canberra on the 14th of November. Now, I heard whispers that there's somebody looking to see if we can't get a plane happening to get people down there. So it means you're not up for 30 hours on the road and all the costs that are associated with accommodation, etc. So I'm not saying that is happening, but there's certainly people looking into that to see if we can make that happen. So please sign up at the website, Australia Marches, follow them on socials. They'll keep you informed about that. So on with the program. Our next speaker is Councillor Adam Zara. Now, I've not met Adam till this evening, but he was thrust into the political spotlight during the COVID lockdowns. And he looked at the poor leadership and decision-making at both state and federal governments, and that motivated him to run as a political candidate. So he got extraordinary results as a minor party candidate in Macarthur in the 22 federal election and in Campbelltown at the 23 New South Wales election. He was subsequently elected to the Campbelltown City Council as an independent in 2024, which is a pretty good effort. So, you know what, we are winning. We are getting some small wins, and we need to celebrate all those along the way. So Adam believes that Australia needs a political solid structure and strong leadership. And I think we can all agree that currently we don't have a solid political structure or strong leadership. Certainly not one that's working for the people. So please help me to welcome Councillor Adam Zara.
Well, hi everyone. Thank you all for having me tonight. I'm a councillor from Campbelltown, and you might be wondering why would somebody from a local council far away from here want to come and have a look. Well, as I was kindly introduced, I started off in a federal and state realm of politics, okay? So I've got a keen heart for this kind of thing, and I don't like seeing small communities being destroyed for something with basically a net gain, a zero net gain, okay? You destroy prime bushland, prime agricultural lands for things that aren't going to pay off or pay us any dividends in the future, okay? Things that wear out after 10 years, solar panels, you know, they're not as efficient as they're meant to be. They don't last as long. You get some hail or anything like that and you have to replace them. Wind, the turbines, just them operating, they go blunt. After 10 years, you're replacing blades, whether they even last the 10 years or not explode and catch fire, as we've all seen. Okay, so that's why I'm interested and why I'd like to hear what people are saying on the ground. As a local councillor, that is my job, is to have my ear on the ground to hear what the people of my LGA and other LGAs are saying, okay? We've had some very good speakers so far. So Stephen, Katie, Scott, and we're looking very forward to hearing from Dr. Gary Johns as well. So basically what I do is I believe that, as Stephen mentioned, that the Senate, the House of Review, should always be independent. Okay, they shouldn't be attached to parties where we have party ties. And we've all heard the line of toe the party line. We've all heard that, and that's what they do very, very well. So from my experience in council, okay, so I'm normally walking around, sorry. So my experience in council has been a privilege. It's been also very, very hard as an independent, okay? We don't have full-time, it's not a full-time job being a councillor. We all work, okay? Full-time jobs. I'm a small business owner. So as anyone here, small business owners, you know you're always working. Even when you're not working, you're working, okay? I'm working right now. But anyway, so what happens is, what happens is, why I came up with the idea of an independent House of Review in state and federal is because of my experiences in council, okay? When I try to put anything forward that might really, really benefit the citizens, and it doesn't matter, it's not about race, it's not about creed, that's federal and state, we can talk about all that all you want, but what we're talking about is actually benefiting the citizens of the local area, okay? Now, Campbelltown Hospital has been beautifully rebuilt. It's a huge hospital, okay? And you're still waiting 12 and a half hours before you get seen in emergency, okay? So that's when people are at their most vulnerable. We have this multi-million-dollar hospital, okay? Now, 10 years ago, prior to COVID, okay, you could go in there, sit down for an hour, you'd be seen by your triage nurse, and then an hour or two later, there's always a wait, okay, you would go in and be treated, okay? And it was nice because you could go into consulting rooms, you would be able to lay down in a bed and all this kind of stuff. A recent experience, not too long ago, a little bit longer than when it all first came up, but it's about 2 years ago now, I went into hospital. 12 and a half hours sitting there, okay? There was no dignity in it. I was in agony. I had I don't even care, I'll share with you. I had gallstones, okay? So it's painful, okay? And what happens is, I went in the first time, wait my 12 hours. Oh, here's some painkillers, how's the pain? Oh, I'm okay now. Okay, go home. Went back a second time. Oh, here's some more painkillers. No worries, go home, go see your GP. Okay, went the third time, and I had already seen the GP, and then he said, you have to go to hospital. I went to hospital, another 12 hours sitting in hospital, okay? Now I had to do a sample, okay? And you think, oh, it's a sample, you'd be able to go to a private toilet and all that stuff. No, so it's flat out in there. The toilets are still messy. I'm there trying to do the sample that needs to be done, okay? And I'm sitting down still for another 2 hours in the hospital, okay? Holding my sample. The doctor comes to me and then goes, can I please have your sample? So I'm in the waiting room with other patients around me handing off a sample in a multi-million state-of-the-art hospital that has just been built. I think that's pretty disgusting. Now, that leads me back to my point of independence, and I think local councils should be independent. And I know that you guys, it's actually inspiring that you guys have independent local councillors. Well, not all over the state, not all over the country that happens, okay? So I then put in a report, did some research, and saw how Campbelltown Hospital's performance has gone right down. I mean, we lost 50% of our performance of our baselines, and we're down to 24% from 74%. That's a lot. That's a big drop, as I saw. Now, we are a Labor-led council, okay, and obviously Labor's in state, and anything that brings a light onto Labor that is bad gets vetoed, okay. So we put our notices of motions in. Okay, so I'll give you a little bit of rundown. You have to put a notice of motion in. It goes in about a week before, and then it gets printed in the business papers. The business papers are then there for everyone to review and read, okay, public and the councillors. The mayor, being a Labor mayor, didn't like that I was shining a light on how bad the hospital's performing. And then, I don't exactly know what happened, but it was really convenient that all the letters that were written from our state MP and then from our Minister of Health were all dated the same day and tabled as our business meetings, okay? So when you try to put something forward to find out why something's not performing and why something's not working well, okay, and then if it shines a bad light on, they toe the party line. Doesn't matter if it's local, Doesn't matter if it's state, and it doesn't matter if federal, okay? So they're towing the party line. So I think through Australians for Better Government and through other lobby parties as well, Australia First and all that, making independent and non-affiliated people seated in the Senate and in even, I think, councils as well, actually benefits the people because they're not tied to the party. They can make a conscious decision, a conscious vote every time. Okay, when I was campaigning for my state election, I was talking to, the local MP. We were having actually a bit of a debate. And he was talking about that, how he would vote for, not pro-choice, the opposite. So, where, abortion and those kind of things are pro-life, okay? Not pro-choice, pro-life. Thank you very much. So pro-life. But on that night, Chris Minns had announced that, they're going to vote for, pro-choice and all this kind of stuff. And I questioned, because the phones are an amazing thing and you can get information directly. And I actually questioned him in the debate. Well, if it came down to a vote right now, how would you vote? And he goes, well, I would vote with the party. So he's telling the people in the debate, which was in a church, by the way, okay, that he's for pro-life and doesn't believe in all that kind of late-term nonsense and all that kind of thing, but then would still toe the party line. So by taking the independents, by giving independents a little bit more free rein in the upper house, the House of Review, and in local councils, I think that it will come down to more of a conscious decision all the time. And I think that is something that was really important. That's what drew me to Australians for Better Government, okay? And that's why I'm a patron for Australians for Better Government. And I also know a lot of the team and a lot of the committee that are behind Australians for Better Government. And that's what really, really matters, because it's about the driving force, okay? I think in any level of government, I don't think individuals are really, really bad, but I think what happens is they get pulled into the party, and the party line really, really does actually skew their vote. So in finishing, I just think that some of the key points that are here are really, really important. And I want all of you guys to know that you should reach out to your local council members and you can get them to petition for you, okay? If you don't want this dam to be built, you need to get onto them and they need to put pressure onto their MPs to let them know that the people in the area don't want those things, okay? So these groups are amazing and the lobby groups really, really help, but it also does come down to your groundwork and your footwork and what you guys do, okay? Partitions in council don't really work because it's registered as one vote or one partition or one person saying something, whereas if you form a group and then everyone writes in individual messages or rejections or disputes or whatever it could be, that certainly carries much more weight. Okay, well, thank you for your time, and I hope I was able to help you with, any information.
Thank you, Adam. That was terrific, because I don't think many of us actually understand how things work when you're on the inside and why it's so difficult to create change. And that's why what Scott was saying before about having a block of people elected. And really it doesn't matter what their stripes are, so long as they're truly representing the people, not representing the party. That's my opinion anyway. So we are at that point in the evening where we have our keynote speaker, Dr. Gary Johns. Now, Gary has co-authored a book about, I'm going to call it the COVID years, about the reckless unreliables, about the gender nonsense, and he has a lot to say in this space. I'm going to tell you a personal anecdote about Gary. So he was this kind of untouchable person, so far as I was concerned. And I was in Albury-Wodonga at a conference, and I was really wanting to get to meet somebody from Advance. And this was after the referendum and the no vote. And Gary was on his own at one end of the room at a table, and I made my way over there, introduced and I'm nobody, right? I'm just this random woman from somewhere. And I said, look, I'd really like to be able to talk to somebody because I'm part of Australia Exits the WHO, and it's a really important topic and it's something we'd like Advance to look at some stage. Now, Gary was kind enough to get me a personal introduction. And I'm just going to say that's the character of this man. He is solution orientated. He has got common sense. He's looking at problems logically as how can we fix this. So he's not out there bleating about these are all the problems. He's also looking at, okay, so what has to happen to change that? And Gary, I don't even know if you remember that incident of helping me with that, but that has stuck with me. And that's the kind of people we want to have on our team, is people that are going to do what it takes to move things forward. They're going to facilitate conversations that are going to make stuff happen. He's got a whole pile of credentials behind him, and he's, as I said, he's written this book. He's also he's focused on solutions. What can we do? How can we make this better? He's served as a minister in the second Keating government in the House of Representatives. He's also served as the Commission of Australian Charities and Not-for-Profit Commissions. He's chair of Close the Gap Research, so he does a lot of stuff. He's, in my opinion, he's not out there screaming from the rooftops about what he's doing. He's just getting on with the job quietly behind the scenes. I know we're going to learn a lot from him tonight. He's going to give us a lot of value. So please help me to welcome Dr. Gary Johns.
Beautiful. Deborah, thank you very much indeed. It worries me that I was sitting at the end of a table all by myself when you go, but I was at it. Thank you indeed. Now, public health is a very particular thing. I'm not a critic of medical health as such. My beef is when medical practitioners jump in or outside their field and tell us how to solve problems that are not medical. So, lovely illustration from our councillor before. That's an awful position that he was placed in, to have to wait, in a sense, 38 hours, I think it was, to be attended to. One of the reasons for that is because we spend too much money on the wrong things. So some of this book is about why we spend too much money on the wrong things and why it happens. So this is a field that you hear about all the time, especially, say, during COVID, when medical practitioners, very senior people, were telling us how they could save us from one source of risk, COVID-19, but they forgot we had to get on with our lives, and there are 1,000 sources of risk that determine the length and health of our lives. We got obsessed with one thing. I want to explain why that happens. So, there are a lot of people in this country, including departments of health, who think that health is socially determined. And they say, and this is very UN speak, people's access to power, money and resources are the unfair and avoidable difference in health status. If only that were true. And they say no stone is to be left unturned to help even those who did not ask for it. Now, this is an example of a person who's probably a brilliant scientist doing really stupid things in the name of medical science because she wants to help solve the problems of the world. So she defines a lot of things as public health when they're not. So Dr. Monique Ryan is a federal Teal member, an independent, down in Kooyong in Melbourne. She was a paediatric neurologist. This is what's on her website. Heat waves are Australia's most deadly climate hazard, responsible for more deaths than extreme floods, storms and bushfires combined. But they remain a silent killer. It's time for Australia to name heat waves, give a heat wave a name and protect vulnerable people. And she runs that. That is stupid. That is a stupid thing to do. But she's a paediatric neurologist. What a waste of a good brain. that you would do this sort of stuff. She's the woman you might recall in Parliament when they were all behind their masks, berating everyone else. Put your masks on. She wanted to control everyone. And those chief medical health officers who ran this country for a good 2 years, along with some foolish premiers and a misguided Prime Minister, were just demonic about one particular source of fear among all of the rest that we still had to live with every day. So, in the book, what we're trying to explain is the many ways in which medically qualified people are telling us how to run our lives when most of the determinants of how we run our lives are not medical. But for a politician and an ex-politician, it's very difficult to overturn the person in the white coat. If they give you advice, especially if they stand in front of a camera, it's very hard for a politician to say, that's not right. Because that white coat and that stethoscope carries a lot of weight. So my object, and we've written at some length about this, is to say you're allowed to question them. You don't have to question them on the science. I'm not a scientist, but by God, you can question them on the use of their medical qualifications for essentially non-medical issues. So, a lot of examples. If you look in the Commonwealth Department of Health's website, it'll have this big thing about the determinants of health. And what they'll tend to say is the poor have poorer health. That's generally true. But the implication is, why don't we make everyone not poor? That's a revolution. You are talking revolution in order to solve some of the health problems of the poor. And I say some of the health problems because most health problems are determined by our DNA. It's your mum and dad's fault. But on a big chart, honestly as big as this, with all the social determinants of health and power and inequality and injustice and all that sort of stuff, is one tiny little line that says genes. So our genes are they are overwhelmingly the most important thing that determines our health. So the space for intervention in keeping us healthy is really quite narrow. It's not to say we shouldn't help people where we can, but we have oversold the notion that we can make everyone equally healthy. That's just a nonsense. But it's a nonsense that's used by some people to grab a lot of power. And that's what happened during COVID. And we give other examples. This is an enormous emphasis that healthcare costs will fall if we change our lifestyle. So, for instance, in tobacco, once it was proved that smoking tobacco could cause cancer, governments thought that they should ban tobacco products, and in lieu of banning it, they'd price it out. And then the politicians who are always hungry for revenue really started to price it out. So if you look at a graph of the decline in the number of people who smoke in the last 30 years, much of the decline occurred through just education. Everyone got the idea that this is pretty risky behaviour, especially as you got a little bit older. And the politicians got in on it and started to tax tobacco very, very, very heavily. Now, I shop at the local Coles and I see the poor buggers who buy cigarettes when I go in there, and they're paying something like $60 a pack of cigarettes. They're the last 10% who smoke, and they can't afford $60 a pack, and I think that's just cruel. That's government trying to screw money out of those who can least afford it with no payoff. Those people are hooked, they will smoke. So what did we do when we overtaxed tobacco to billy-o? We created a black market. So the revenue to the Commonwealth has gone way down And all the money that used to be paid for in legal tobacco is now paid for in illegal tobacco, and crooks are getting the revenue. So it's just this, and there are 20 professors in Australia of public health who want zero tobacco. Not happy with 10, 12% of smokers, they want zero. I don't know what you'd get if they have succeeded. You wouldn't get a black market. I mean, you would get just mayhem out there if people couldn't access tobacco. So it's the overreach and it's the misuse of science. There's some wonderful work done by a number of economists who looked at the COVID response right around the world. And in Australia and in Canada, probably the best statistics have said that the cost to Australians of the COVID response, you know, the business of locking us up and masking us and all the rest of it, was 68 times the benefits. And the benefits were a very small reduction, maybe, in the number of deaths from very elderly people who, with great respect to us all, we're going to die in the next year or two, or probably in the next flu season. So the benefits were very minor. The costs in the interruption to our entire economy, society, kids going to school, people not being able to visit elderly parents, we don't relive all that. 68 times. How we came to make such a bad response has a lot to do with public health officials. Now, I've spoken to a number of medical people recently. They say, look, it was the politicians telling us. And that may be true in some instances, but the politicians do have an ear to the men and women in white coats, believe me. And if they're being told that this is the greatest drama that's ever befallen the world, then they tend to react. And if they're told they have to lock down and that lives will be saved because of it, and then newspaper editors make that the front page, the politicians will tend to say, well, we better lock down. Foolishly, we voted for many of those politicians, but that's another story. Another way in which public health officials and others cost us a lot of money is, of course, the NDIS, with which we're very familiar and which has got away from us. And a lot of that happened by good people lobbying politicians on behalf of disabled children in the main. They wanted them better looked after, better cared for. We all understand and applaud that. But almost without knowing, about 15 years ago, definitions of certain mental health conditions, autism, ADHD, etc., were widened in the US, so that it became possible for medical people to say, this child carries this condition, and lo and behold, we had a new scheme which said this scheme will cover a certain number of conditions. So we, if you like, medicalised things that were previously not medicalised. And we're paying about $50 billion a year for a scheme that was never intended for that purpose. Now, I just want to put this in context. I'm not saying we should not all be healthy, of course we should. But if you want to line up for, what was it, 38 hours at a public hospital, it's because we misspend a lot of money. We get a lot of things wrong. We scare the pants off people over tobacco, and a lot of money goes to the black market. We scared everyone over COVID, and we spent 68 times, in a sense, what we should have spent on the proper response to COVID. And the other thing is too that we have to be more modest about how we can intervene to help our health, because most of it, as I say, is genetically determined. And the other thing too is that we are wealthier and we do go to the doctor more often. So no matter the brilliance of medical science, we're wealthy enough to want to go to the doctor, and that generates a cost because it's covered by Medicare. And we also get to physios and chiros and all the rest a lot more than we used to do. This is not a bad thing at all. We use more medical services. It's one reason that drives up the costs of medical services. We want that. We live in a wealthy society. This is too difficult to read, Gary, so let's not read it. The message is, we are living longer, but we are living longer and healthier lives, but we are living longer with disabilities. So the real costs of most of our lives comes in the later years. So for all our brilliance, for all our medical science, we are living longer with a disability, and the cost of that continues to rise. So again, we can't afford to waste a penny doing stupid things with money that needs to go to all of this work. We are ageing, we are living with disability, it's very costly. So every single penny needs to go to those who need it and not wasted on foolish responses to COVID and whatever. Now, very quickly, it's a bit unfortunate, but if you want to lead the healthiest life that your DNA can afford you, do what smart people do. And I've read a lot of the material in this, and there aren't many other paths out of this. For instance, you can spend $1 billion, you know, Merck or whatever the wonderful big pharmaceutical companies, I know not everyone loves pharmaceutical companies, can develop a pill that will, whatever, help you bring down your hypertension or whatever. But if you don't take the tablet every day, it has no effect. And so much of the money we spend on pharmacology is simply wasted. People, let's say, aren't sufficiently disciplined to do as they're told. Now, I guess I'm partly of the ilk that says that's their choice. But again, we think if we spend an enormous amount of money on medical interventions, it will solve problems. It won't. Ultimately, it comes to us making choices, and even then those choices are very narrowly confined because of who we are and when we were born. So the intervention is very narrow. Now, one of the things that public health officials have been very good, especially during COVID, for instance, is to say COVID will kill millions. It was never true. So that, and we know the figures now have been reworked many times, if the number of people who died with or from COVID, who are 85 years and older, were taken out of the figures, we didn't have a pandemic. We did not have a pandemic at all. It's the number who were not at that age or, you know, had comorbidities, who died from or with COVID, were actually very small. And for this, we shut down the nation. It was a form of madness and really bad analysis. In fact, we know the fellow who runs Sky News, now News 24, and he told us that during COVID, he made a lot of money because everyone was locked up at home and he was running a 24-hour channel with everyone locked up at home worried about COVID. I mean, he wasn't apologising, he wasn't bragging, he said that's the way it was. He had a captive audience, literally, scaring them. A lot of detail here, which you'll find a lot of good case studies in the book, but just very briefly. It's always argued that if we could save people from smoking, it would save on health costs. It doesn't. what it tends to do, it's good to stop smoking, believe me. But the things that are going to take us out later in life are still probably going to happen, unrelated to smoking. And if you stop smoking, you stop paying the taxes on smoking. And if you do keep smoking, you probably won't draw a pension. So there's a saving. Not a laughing matter, Gary, I know. But what I'm saying is the argument by public health officials that they're doing all of us good by stopping people from smoking is wrong. It doesn't save the rest of us any money. I'm not saying it's not a good thing for the person, but the social argument, the public health argument, is just wrong. Same thing on alcohol advertising. This is a different discussion entirely. Again, a bit complicated. But it's basically saying, and you'll read this every other day in The Australian, which is the only paper I read, and I love The Australian, but there's always a medical section. And there's always a breakthrough to, solve whatever it is, cancer of whatever. And we all hope that is true. However, what tends to happen is that people will tend to say you're at risk of developing, say, in this case, breast cancer if you drink. And they tend to confuse different sorts of risk. Without going into it, again, they overstate the number of people, women in this case, who are actually at risk from excess drinking. And the numbers, you'll see a headline number of 10% of women, would be better off if they stopped drinking. But the real number's down here. A tiny, tiny number would change the way they drink as a consequence, and of those who might have been affected with cancer might be saved. So a lot of headlines in articles that are written about public health are just way overblown, with one intention: to have more intervention in health. So this is the really interesting part, because Deborah mentioned, I like to get onto, what are the solutions? Is that there's a case recently of a doctor in Victoria who was, he lost his licence as a GP because he was making various comments, a bit over the top in many ways, on Facebook, I think it was. He was a very religious man, anti-abortion, he didn't like the response to COVID and so on and so forth. None of that had to do with his relationship between he as a doctor and his patients. But the medical board rubbed him out. 7 years, I think it's been going on for 7 years now, and he still hasn't got his practicing certificate back. It's too late really now, because he's gone off. He had to feed his family. He's gone off to do other things. But talking to his barrister about the case, because he wants his name cleared and so on and so forth, is that there is, in an act of parliament that sort of governs these things, no definition of what unprofessional conduct is. So they were rubbing this bloke out for, I think the term was unprofessional conduct, without defining it, and the Act doesn't define it. But when I spoke to the barrister, he said, well, what they use is the medical codes of ethics of, say, the Royal College of GPs or the Royal College of Physicians or whatever. So the professional organisations themselves are writing rules that lead them liable to be knocked off for things that have nothing to do with their medical knowledge, the relationship between them and their patients. And that astounds me, and this is a lovely example. This has to do with nurses. This is an extract of the International Council of Nurses Code of Ethics. Nurses and midwives. It applies in Australia. In fact, it was written by an Australian. Stupid person. And this is the sort of stuff in a medical code of ethics. And we'll go into these. Work towards achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Nurses? Recognise the significance of the social determinants of health, which we talked about. Collaborate to protect the natural environment and aware of the health consequences of environmental degradation, climate change. Medical ethics. It's got nothing to do with this stuff. And the last one, uphold justice by promoting responsibility in human rights, equity and fairness, the public good and a healthy planet. Now, if you're a member of the Greens, there are probably unlikely to be any members of the Greens here. You might sign up to that. But this is a code of ethics for nurses, people who have to do a lot of work at public hospitals and triage people and help them and so on. So that's a sort of madness. And one of the speakers before was talking about the power of the UN. I'm not so worried about the power of the UN. I'm worried about professional organisations where everyone in the profession is so busy they're not looking. Who was made president, secretary, who's sitting on the committee, and why do they pick up these really foolish ideas that have nothing to do with medical ethics? So as an old politician, we have to get some people in each profession to turn up to meetings and say, I don't want that set of ethics. I just want the old one, which said something like, do no harm. And I'll finish on this point. The Alberta in Canada ran a review of Alberta's response to COVID, and it was quite brilliant because they concentrated on how doctors were, if you like, pushed around by medical health officers. And their solution was, you leave the relationship between the doctor and the patient alone. It's none of your business. I, as a doctor, would be medically trained. You are my client, my patient, sorry, and we'll work it out. If you don't like my view, go to another doctor. But doctors were being, harassed, berated, locked up, shut down, all the rest, because they didn't toe the line on that sort of singular COVID response, which seemed to have come out of China. Crazy stuff. So this is a sort of a subclass of a field of what everyone else has spoken about tonight. Why do we get pushed around? In the medical field, we get pushed around for all the reasons I've spoken of, but one of the ways we have to fight back, I think, is you've got to talk to your own medical people, your own doctors, physios and all the rest, and say, have you looked at the code of ethics which supposedly governs your conduct? And most of them will say, no, I'm too busy. Get them to have a look at it, get them to turn up to meetings and get them to rip this political agenda out of their codes of ethics, and it's less likely that will be overrun by madness next COVID. Please have a look at the book and you'll find not just one way of fighting back, but 10. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Johns. I think he was the only speaker that finished within his time period, so that was impressive. So please go across to talk to Anthony from Connor Court, grab a copy of the book. I think you'll even get it personally signed tonight. We're about to do our Q&A, so we've got quite a few questions to get through. So if I could have Katie, Stephen, Dr. Johns, because I have questions for all of you, that would be amazing. I think I was asked to move to the other side, so go and do that. What do we got here? Looks good. So just give us a minute or two and we'll get set up and we'll be all sorted here. Oh, here we go. Here's all of our lovely faces for the Q&A. So Scott Challen, Dr. Johns, Katie McCallum and Stephen Tripp, if you could please take your seats at the front of the room. So I'm going to get started while some people play with their cameras and do that, because my first question is for Dr. Johns. Dr. Johns, will we ever get adequate accountability for Australia's response to COVID?
No, sorry.
That was easy.
Sorry, let me expand. No. The Commonwealth has already had a commission, not a royal commission, a commission into the COVID response, and it was sort of like a pro forma written out by a bunch of public servants who predetermined who the vulnerable people to COVID would be. And it was the usual Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander, culled, what's culled now? But it used, the fancy term now for non-English speaking people, women, blah, 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 and went through. The one they missed was people who are vulnerable to COVID. They simply didn't write it in. So the rest of it sort of followed on like that, and this is very brief. Nick Coatsworth was the Deputy Chief Medical Health Officer, and he wrote a submission to the inquiry, and he said, look, in the first 6 months, we really weren't sure. It was panic stations, but after that, we knew this wasn't as difficult as we thought, and we should have changed direction. But he said everyone had locked in. They were path dependent. He put his submission in, and it was ignored. They did not publish it. So, yeah, no.
So thank you, Dr. Johns. Next question is to Scott. Scott, should we ban lobbyists in Parliament, or are some lobby groups necessary?
Well, clearly we need to have a really good look at it, and I think the extreme position to take is to ban it, just as I want to shut the gates with mass immigration. I want to shut the gates completely on immigration. I want a hard stop for 5 years. And people will go, well, that's extreme. Well, we can push for the extreme position, and then we may have to compromise slightly back from that, and I don't think that's a problem. You've got to boot the Overton window over. So yeah, I want to ban foreign lobbying. I want to ban people having influence in our government that aren't Australian citizens. Now, I know we have to have deals with some countries, defence agreements. We should only ever really have trade agreements with countries that we have defence agreements with. Why import everything we used to make in Australia from China when, hypothetically, if we're going to go to war, it'll be with China? It's ridiculous. We all know it's stupid. It doesn't make any sense. But this is the position that we've found ourselves in. So yeah, I 100% support banning foreign lobbying, and I believe that we need more accountability in lobbying. I'll also point out that since we registered as a lobbying entity, the Albanese government decided to look deeper at lobbying in Australia. I'll just say that's a coincidence.
Very coincidental. If you could pass that down to Stephen, because he's my next target. Stephen, do you prefer introducing a citizens-initiated veto or a citizens-initiated referendum?
Australians for Better Government support both. There's, I guess, advantages and disadvantages with both. I think citizens-initiated veto is probably the stronger option, because that allows everyday Australians to lobby together, put forward a petition to repeal legislation. And we're seeing a lot of legislation going through the Parliament that the Australian people are just not asking for. Are we asking for a digital ID? I don't see anyone putting their hand up asking for that. I don't see anyone putting their hand up asking for any sort of ban on under 16s from using social media. Maybe some people do. So I think that's the strength of citizens-initiated veto. When it comes to citizens-initiated referenda, that's a little bit more maybe dangerous, because you may get some nefarious groups putting some really fancy legislation forward, but ultimately it goes to a vote of the Australian people, and the Australian people collectively decide. So I think that's the safety mechanism. If the majority of the Australian people want something, then that's the society that we live in, and it's up to people that oppose that legislation to be able to formulate a credible argument to push back against it. So I lean more to citizens-initiated veto, but I think citizens-initiated referenda would be necessary for things like enshrining free speech in the Constitution. We're not going to get that unless we have CIR.
Thank you. Katie, what would be your first actions if you were elected to Parliament and appointed as the Minister for Climate Change?
That's quite easy, but it comes at the top of a list of a whole heap of things that I would like to do. But I would immediately tear up net zero and remove us from the Paris Agreement and tell the United Nations where to go. But I would like to add to that the next priority for me would be to change the way our kids are educated in schools. They are being forced to think that they should be guilty. The rates of depression in children of my kids' ages, 13, 14, 15, 16 at the moment, they think that they should feel guilty for being on this earth. They've been told that the climate is changing, that it's all our fault. They look at us, they think it's our fault. They feel guilty because they're breathing oxygen. Suicide's off the charts in this age bracket of children because they've been made to feel guilty for being alive. Like, where do we go wrong? And this all stems from climate change. They've been using it since I was a kid. I was told in primary school that there was an ice age coming and suddenly that changed. Does everybody remember the ice age that was coming to get us? It's madness, right? It's a control mechanism. It needs to be stopped. And yes, if I was the minister, if I was ever to be able to be afforded that position, that's what I would do. Get rid of those two things and fix the education system.
Thank you, Katie. Dr. John, you spoke of Monique Ryan. How do you compare our current crop of parliamentarians to when you served in Parliament?
Well, there's no comparison, of course. Yeah. Two things. Don't obsess about changing the rules. With great respect to us all. We just had a referendum, right, 2023, where very wealthy people said we should have two classes of citizen, Aboriginal and not Aboriginal. And thank goodness the rest of us said, look, we don't accept that. Every person should be a citizen equally. But it cost us tens of millions of dollars, a lot of angst, a lot of time wasted when we should have been doing other things. So my plea is, was a dual plea. One, let's not obsess too much about the rules. You'll spend a lot of time mucking around with the rules and you'll get no different result. Now, the quality of MPs, I don't know. They're under a lot of pressure, believe me. The social media, they're out every night. What's our joke, Catherine? You know, you brought up the kids. I was never there for the first 9 years. You know, more or less true. I can cook and do stuff like that too. But the politicians are under enormous pressure because 27 million of us want different things. So you have to organise the differences, and you do have to crunch numbers and whack heads, and parties do arise out of that. You put 150 independents into the House of Commons, in House of Reps, and you'll get 150 wars going on. Most of the wars take place inside the parties. It's ugly in there, but you don't see that, thank goodness. You just see the top people at the top. It's not as if they're all locked in. My God, there's punching going on underneath all the time. None of that detracts from all of you good people today getting together and agreeing on perhaps, you know, the most important things that you should do. The most important one is get rid of this nonsense on renewables. That is a killer. That's really killing us. And the other one is all the ideology that gets into our kids' heads. Yeah. But you've got to do that bit by bit. You can't. Probably on school education you could pass some laws, but you'll have to be in government for some years if you want to outbid the effect of teachers' unions on the curriculum. And that's the parallel to my thing about doctors, very few of whom actually take notice and go along to meetings and pass all this nonsense into their own set of codes of ethics. So that's where you've got to fight it. Among the professionals, get into their ears, get them to pull some of the more stupid things out. That's more powerful, if I might say, than time spent on trying to change the rules. The lobbying stuff I think is good. I think that's good because that is getting in people's ears under the existing rules.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to follow up with this question to Scott. Scott, do you have faith in any politicians or political parties to put Australia first?
Look, they're not all treasonous scum. But as I said before, this is the best paid job that many of them will ever have. We saw that great piece from Dr. Monique Ryan, an intelligent lady, highly qualified, but does she really believe the garbage that's on her website? Or is that because she knows that there's a pot of gold funded by Simon Holmes Court down the track there somewhere in White Cannon Brooks? Yep. We know that. We know it's not real. We know they lie about pretty much everything. What I find deeply troubling is the good politicians that we know that we have, like I'll use Matt Canavan, for example, great politician, great guy, good to meet, agree pretty on a lot of things, but he will not tell you the whole truth. He'll tell you some of it. We know that. And what we've seen consistently since 2020 is that everything you're being told now is a lie. Every statistic, every data point, everything is a lie. In the building industry, we know that inflation's running at around 8 to 10%, but we're at 3.8 apparently. It's all good. We didn't need another interest rate rise. Look, I don't want to see interest rate rises. I've got a good friend in the audience here. I'd hate to see interest rates go up. But the reality is they have overcooked the economy. These politicians know what they've done, and no one's telling you the truth, not the whole truth. Now, Katie made a really good point about the education before. I would love to see the Australia First Patriots that we get elected band together from whatever party they are, whatever allegiance they are, whatever colour they wear, and demand in the first 100 days of whatever the government is, if we have control, if we have the balance of power, that we unwind a lot of shit quickly. And everyone goes, the good doctor here said that it would take time and years. Well, I disagree with that. Because during COVID, we made decisions very, very quickly to shut the economy down. There was a precedent already proven that you can take action quickly when the incentive is there. Now, when the bodies were dropping to the floor from the footage coming out of Wuhan in China and everyone was panicking, and we now know that was all bullshit, they acted. They flinched. And then the lobbyists got involved, and then the foreign interests got involved, and then suddenly we were buying billions of dollars worth of vaccines from Pfizer. Things can happen quickly when people with will and courage take action. Now, we want to take action, and I believe that that's what the Australian people want, and I think if we can find the discipline to act accordingly, we will get politicians who will tell you the truth. I don't want to be lied to anymore. I want to know what the truth is. And that's why we're all here, because we know they're spinning bullshit constantly. So let's get people in there that tell us the truth. Now, Katie's going to tell us the truth. Katie's going to tell us that, look, we can stop the Snowy project. We can just call it off. We can bury the machine. We can give it up. And we can build a nuclear power reactor we can just end it, cut our losses and walk away from the table. Look, if you've been to the casino at 3 a.m. and you've seen someone there still betting at 3 a.m. on roulette, throwing $100 notes down, it's time to go home, mate. That's Australia right now. Hard decisions.
Thank you. Pastor Steve, please.
That's all.
These are segueing really well, these questions in the second half. Governments and politicians keep lying and breaking their promises. How do we build more accountability into our system, and how can we fire the liar?
Well, I want to pick up on what Dr. Johns was saying about more rules and more legislation and all that sort of thing. Look, we want smaller government, we want less rules, and we want less legislation. We want government out of our lives. But unfortunately, we can't rely on the politicians anymore. We need to rely more on the Australian people to get involved politically. And we need to start building accountability into our system. So how do we do that? Well, Australian people are going to have to get more involved. Because whether it be maybe the politicians are not up to it, and I don't believe that. I think it's probably more to do with the political parties stifling the politicians or stifling the pre-selection process. The Australian people have to get more and more involved. So how do we do that? Now, we all know we go into a polling booth and we get the big ballot papers and all that sort of thing. We may have to introduce another ballot paper. Now, if you look to America when they vote for their president, they not just vote for their president, they vote for the vice president, they vote for congressmen, they vote for chiefs of departments, they sometimes have constitutional referendums on there. They have a whole host of things on this ballot paper that they go and vote for at election time. Why can't we do similar things here in Australia? When have the Australian people ever been asked on the adequate level of immigration? We've never been asked. So why can't that be on a ballot paper? Set the level of immigration every time we go to a federal election. What about the debt ceiling? We're never asked about the debt ceiling. Why can't the Australian people set the debt ceiling? And then if the government exceeds that, bang, you go to a double dissolution. That's building accountability into the system because the politicians, they don't want to lose their jobs. They like it in there. So if they know if they're going to exceed the debt ceiling, they're going to go to a double dissolution and likely lose their seat. What do you think they're going to do? They're going to stop spending. So we need to build that accountability into our system and give the power back more to the people. And if we have to introduce more laws like recall elections or citizens initiated veto or these more polling methods, then that might be something that we have to do. We at least need to start the discussion. All the proposals that Australians for Better Government are putting forward, we're not saying they're the best proposals out there, but at least we're talking about it. And we want these discussions with people that even disagree with us because they may come up with better options. We did an event, and I'll finish on this, down in Adelaide, where we were advocating for abolishing omnibus bills. An omnibus bill is when the government tries to ram through multiple bills under the one legislation and push it through with one vote. We want to get rid of that and just have single issue bills and have the Parliament debate those single issue bills. Well, Michael Arbin, who was one of the speakers down in Adelaide, said, no, I don't completely agree with that because I want to be able to use omnibus bills to repeal legislation. And we thought, well, that's a good idea. So let's have single issue bills for introducing legislation, but then have omnibus bills for repealing legislation. And that's where the power is for having events like this, where we can have different speakers that are not part of Australians for Better Government coming, hear our ideas, hear our proposals, and add their spin to it. And sometimes we pick up their ideas and adapt it to what we're doing. It's all about starting the discussion and pushing back on the current system and saying, how do we make it better?
Thank you, Stephen. Okay, we've got 3 questions left. This one's for Katie. Is Chris Bowen the worst minister we've ever had?
Yes.
So I had a sitting member of the federal parliament approach me the other day and say, Katie, you need to be careful when you speak. He said, because with all this stuff that they've got in place now, you don't really want to call Chris Bowen any nasty names today. That was at Bundaberg last weekend. Yeah, right. And so he was giving me the warning, and I realised today that I did call him a jockey, so I hope that hasn't upset him if he ever sees the footage from this tonight. But yes, he is. Yes.
Okay. So the next question we have is one that I'm going to take off the table and answer myself. It's what will be done to make the complete constitutional system lawful? And it's talking about the difference between lawful and legal. We can't do anything till we get people into positions where we can do something. And that's not just the politicians, that's also the public servants, or public servants you might have heard them called. And in order to do that, we need to get what I call middle mainstream Australia on board. So that's a debate for down the track. It's not one until we get to somewhere where we can change things. Until we can change things, there's no point going on about what's right and what's wrong, because half the population can't even hear that argument and completely turn off. We have to start with how do we get people into positions where we can start to make that change. The last question that we have is one for all of our speakers, and it's in regard to the UN. And I'm going to start down your end, Scott, so you need to be organised. So what can we do to remove Australia from the United Nations?
Just leave. Just leave. Stop paying the bill. Just walk out. It's as simple as that. You're in a bad contract. You walk away from the contract, and there's no reason to stay in it. Let's just do it. It just takes will and courage. It's not fit for purpose in the world that's unfolding right now. Like many institutions around the world and around the country, a lot of these agreements have signed us up to things that just don't work anymore. The UN is no different. I'll take our chances. We'll carry a big stick. We'll walk softly, and we'll be an independent country.
On balance, I think we should leave. Yeah.
I agree. It's that simple. And we need to get out of the Paris Agreement yesterday.
So back to the ballot paper that I was talking about before, that we would be hopefully filling in every election period. One thing I did forget to mention, and thankfully this question has come up, the Australian people should be asked whether or not we should be a member of the United Nations. Put it to the Australian people, and that's generally what ABG's view is. It's not up to us to decide, it's not up to the politicians to decide, it's up to the Australian people to decide. And we have never, ever been asked on whether or not we should be a member of the United Nations, and I'm very interested to see what that result would be. And it should come up on every election day or every election year. It should come up on the ballot paper, including all the other international treaties and groups that we're part of, whether it be the WHO or whatever it might be. And if people think that it's good to be part of the United Nations, then they should make those credible arguments and convince the Australian people of the reasons why we should be a member. But if not, then we leave.
Thank you to all of our wonderful panel. Thank you for your contribution and speaking here tonight. Thank you for broadening the conversation and putting that message out to more people. And so for those of you that are here tonight, the baton's passed to you to also go out and have conversations and talk to people and encourage them to sign up to Australians for Better Government, the lobby group, to read Dr. John's book. There's so many avenues for us to move this forward, and we just need to all work together. So if I could ask all four of you to just disappear, that'd be great, and we'll just wrap this up here. So thank you. And our clicker's not working again, Stephen. All right, so as I just said, please get involved. There's a lot of people sitting on the fence, and nothing happens when we sit on the fence. We actually have to make our voices heard. You know, people say going to rallies is a waste of time. As Scott pointed out before, they've created a whole movement from that. We need to get people connected in, joined together, and pulling in the same direction. So to join Australians for Better Government, go to australiansforbetter.com and sign up there. And do we have another slide, Stephen? Sorry, I've no longer got the clicker.
I just want to add one more thing, or a couple more things. Firstly, thank you for everyone coming tonight. As I said, you could be all out partying on a Saturday night, but you've been here to talk about politics, so thank you very much. And hopefully you spread the word of what you've heard here. Maybe tell your grandkids or your kids. I think that's most important. Let's get the youth involved in this discussion as well. And most of all, I want to thank Deborah, because she's hosted this fantastically. She's taken a huge load off my shoulders. Normally I'm the one hosting these, but she's done a great job, and I hope that she can do that in the future and keep taking the load off my shoulders, and she's been a fabulous addition to ABG, so thank you very much, Deborah. And thank you to all of you. Have a safe night.
That was great. Really, really well organised.
Thank you.
Good event.
Well, you know,
A lot of people tuning in too, mate. So, yeah, really good. Nice to meet you. I'm going to grab you, so I'll just shut this off. Righto, guys, that's the Australians for Better Government event tonight, and done and dusted. Thanks for tuning in and watching it. Appreciate the comments, appreciate the questions. I hope you guys got something from it. We'll be cutting clips from this and posting this over the next couple of weeks as well. And stay tuned for more information. The rallies will be kicking off on September 13 in Brisbane, and then we'll be going around Australia. And we're going to take our country back, one meeting at a time, one group of patriots at a time, and fantastic Aussies, everyone. Thanks to Australians for Better Government putting this on tonight. It's been awesome, and we'll see you in the next one.